Very similar to Renee's story is the one of Harry Hoxsey, a Texas businessman whose father had passed on to him an herbal formula that would reveal highly effective against cancer. Unlike Renee, however, Hoxsey was very wealthy and was a natural-born fighter who feared no one. This set the premise for one of the most prolonged and virulent fights between an American citizen and the medical authorities in the history of the United States.
The trouble began with what seemed like good news.
And we now have in our files and our records many, many thousands of case histories and records, pathological proof, X-ray photographic studies that we do positively cure cancer, both internal and external. I give you names, times, dates, names of doctors, names of institutions.
The doctors labeled Hoxsey the worst cancer quack of the century. But Hoxsey's supporters called him an effective healer, persecuted by a medical trust.
But up to now, they have never proven that this treatment don't cure cancer.
The ex-coal miner with an 8th grade education became a legend in his own time. According to the Hoxsey legend, the remedies were discovered by his great-grandfather experimenting on a sick horse. As the story goes, John Hoxsey was a veterinarian whose prize stallion got cancer. He put it out to pasture to die. But 3 weeks later, the tumor had stabilized. He observed the horse eating unusual plants, not part of its normal diet. Within a year, the horse was well. So John Hoxsey began to experiment on animals with the herbs, and he added other popular home remedies. He claimed success and passed the formulas down through the family, who eventually used them on people. Hoxsey said his father was the first to try the medicines on people. He gave young Harry the formulas with a deathbed wish to make the treatment available to people whether or not they could pay. Prophetically, he warned the boy against the high priests of medicine who would fight him jealously. It didn't take long. Hoxsey started his first clinic in Illinois in 1924, and he immediately incurred the wrath of organized medicine. He was arrested more times than any other man in medical history. Yet by the 1950s, the Hoxsey Clinic of Dallas, Texas was the largest privately owned cancer center in the world. Hoxsey clinics reached through 17 states. Endorsing the treatment were senators, judges, and even some doctors. 2 federal courts upheld its therapeutic value. If the treatment was worthless, how did it gain so much support? To claim a cure for cancer is to invite evaluation. While the medical profession turned its back on Hoxsey, numerous individuals did make personal investigations. These experiences repeatedly turned skeptics into believers. Among them was Esquire magazine writer James Wakefield Burke, who in 1939 began covering the Hoxsey story.
My boss, Arnold Gingrich, one day said, "Why don't you go down to Texas and let's expose this fellow. He's getting too big." And the American Medical Association liked to put him out of business, and said, "You go down and get acquainted with him," and says, "We'll do a couple of pieces on him and put an end to this." So it was an assignment. I came to Texas. I expected to stay about a day, get my information, and leave. I became fascinated. I stayed for 6 weeks. Every day, Harry would pick me up, bring me to the clinic. We'd come in the morning, and he would put his arm around these old men and women, say, "Dad, them doctors been cutting you up." Says, "I ain't gonna let them sons of bitches kill you. You're gonna live." And he'd treat them, and I'd watch him treat them. They'd get better and begin to get well. So I wrote an outline for a piece which I called "The Quack Who Cured Cancer." And I sent it back to the editors, but it never came out.
Assistant District Attorney Al Templeton was more than a skeptic. He arrested Hoxsey more than 100 times in 2 years. Then his own brother, Mike, got terminal cancer and secretly went to Hoxsey. When Mike Templeton got well, Al Templeton gave Hoxsey the credit. Hoxsey's prosecutor became his lawyer. More and more people kept supporting Hoxsey's claims of a cure. His boldest promoter was Christian evangelist Gerald Winrod. His radio broadcast reached millions of listeners with sensational reports of Hoxsey's mounting successes.
I wish to begin this broadcast by reading for you what I regard as a very important statement, and I quote, Judge W.L. Thornton, this is the second jury of 12 men that has found in my court that the Hoxsey treatment cures cancer. 10 doctors found that the number of cures reaches into the thousands. Former United States Senator Thomas studied a large number of cures. I had made my own investigation, had satisfied myself that cancer was really being cured by the Hoxsey method. This humble reporter can only say, God bless these quacks, the only quacks who are curing cancer today.
But a new cancer treatment needs more than personal investigations to gain acceptance. It needs a formal scientific review.
And when I say to you, all I want is to have them come here. The American Medical Association, the Pure Food and Drug, the federal government, anybody, come here and make an investigation. And if I don't prove to them beyond any question of a doubt that our treatment is superior to radium X-ray and surgery, then I will lock the doors of this institution forever.
But the medical profession did not respond to his call.
The doctors claimed that they already knew from their medical education that his remedies were had no efficaciousness at all, was no cure. They were just sought in their ways and adamant in their beliefs.
According to Hoxsey, there was a more sinister reason the medical profession wouldn't investigate. Hoxsey said the AMA doctors invited him to demonstrate the treatment. Among them was Dr. Morris Fishbein, editor of the influential AMA journal. According to Hoxsey, the day after his successful demonstration, a high AMA official asked to buy the rights to the formulas. The alleged offer would have given all rights to a group of doctors, including Dr. Fishbein.
Just like Rene, Hoxsey turned down the offer because he could not get the guarantee that the formula would have been made available for free to anyone who ever needed it.
But one thing was certain. Hoxsey had made a very powerful enemy. By crossing swords with Dr. Fishbein, he alienated the most influential figure in medicine. Dr. Fishbein held a unique position. As journal editor, he controlled the main income-producing organ of the AMA and thus the organization. He also published the accepted standards of medical practice. After the Chicago incident, Dr. Fishbein blackballed Hoxsey by branding him a quack in the journal. It commented that Hoxsey's most enthusiastic supporter was the local undertaker. The AMA attack was relentless. Dr. Fishbein and Hoxsey would battle each other for 25 years to come in a drama of national dimensions. But rather than settling the dispute through scientific means, they played it out in the media.
At the association's headquarters in Chicago, vigilant against quackery is Dr. Morris Fishbein.
There is no serum, drug, or combination of drugs that we know that will definitely cure cancer.
When Hoxsey approached the National Cancer Institute for an investigation, the agency refused. The NCI said his medical records were incomplete. Hoxsey said doctors refused to supply necessary records because of Dr. Fishbein's influence. The government concluded it would be a waste of public funds to investigate. Having struck oil in Texas, Hoxsey offered to pay for a test himself. His challenges were putting Dr. Fishbein under public pressure, and the doctor fought back hard in the public arena. But when he wrote blood money for the Hearst Sunday papers, he went too far. Hoxsey sued Dr. Fishbein and the Hearst newspaper empire for libel and slander. He didn't seem to stand a chance. The nation's most notorious quack faced a who's who of American medicine. Surprisingly, Harry Hoxsey became the first man ever to win a judgment against Dr. Fishbein and the AMA. Dr. Fishbein had to resign from his post at the AMA. But the Hoxsey-Fishbein trials held an even more shocking revelation. Dr. Fishbein admitted in court that Hoxsey's supposedly brutal pastes actually did cure external cancers. The most dangerous external cancer is melanoma. It can spread rapidly through the body. Doctors advise extremely radical surgery. Even so, melanoma is often fatal.
we have more positive proven cases of melanoma in our records and our files and the patients to talk to that have been cured in this institution than any institution in the world, and that's a broad statement, but we have the facts to back it up.
Hoxsey went as far as producing his own movie to make his voice heard from the medical profession.
It would be an innovation to men of the medical profession if, instead of devoting so much time and money to court trials, sniping tactics, and smear campaigns, they would come to the clinic, do some investigating, check into our methods, speak to some of our patients. Then they would understand why our treatment has been as effective and, in most cases, far more successful than anything they've had to offer as a solution to the cancer problems.
But instead of accepting the invitation, the medical establishment escalated the war. Mildred Nelson has directed Hoxsey's clinics from the beginning.
But he was never investigated except in a criminal type of a way to see what he might be doing wrong. The Food and Drug have always been famous for harassing the Hoxsey patients. Go to people's houses, take their medicine when it was delivered to them, talk to them, tell them they were doing wrong.
But when the government couldn't stop Hoxsey in court, the FDA decided to take unprecedented action.
Sufferers from cancer, their families, physicians, and all concerned with the care of cancer patients are hereby advised and warned that the so-called Hoxsey treatment for internal cancer has been found on the basis of evidence presented by the FDA to be a worthless treatment. And it was so successful that the FDA then went ahead and issued it in a poster form, which was put up in post offices around the country.
I'm swimming in blood now. They've done everything they possibly can to try to humiliate me. They've had me in court many, many times. But do I care about that? I'm not thinking about what they're doing to me. I'm thinking about the 12,000 patients who's under treatment observation here at this clinic. I'm only thinking of one thing: suffering humanity.
But the government did more than just warn the public. Although federal prosecutors couldn't prove the treatment was worthless, they did outlaw it on technicalities like false labeling in interstate commerce.
At one time, we had 17 clinics open across the country. Food and Drug walked in the same day to every one of them and padlocked them. And no way did Harry have the money to fight that in court, state by state.
After losing all his clinics, Harry Hoxsey eventually gave up his 25-year-long fight against the medical establishment. He built a new clinic in Mexico, put Mildred Nelson in charge, and went back to Texas, where he died in 1974. The Mexican clinic has been treating thousands of patients over the years and is still active today under different doctors after Mildred Nelson passed away. But the Hoxsey treatment has never been made available to American patients, and it cannot even be shipped legally into the country. Those who wish to use the Hoxsey treatment must travel each time to Mexico and are allowed to bring back only the amount needed for their personal use.